good evening, and welcome to Three Black Docs. We are live this evening. And I know you saw the promos because you guys are following us on social media. You saw the promos that we were going to be talking about family reunion and genetics. Well, guess what? Rewind. We're going to talk about something else because there have been too many things happening. These events have been happening nowadays. Instead, we're going to call a family meeting. Now, you know what that means. Y'all know about family meetings, right, Dr. Tiff? Right, Dr. Z? We
Yes.
about to have a family meeting, but first, I need to go grab my drink. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I know that this is just a very, very difficult day. We know that there have been storms rolling around, etc. I tell you, today is just one of them days. So I think let's start by, first of all, acknowledging Storm. I know both of y'all have families. Let's talk a little bit about that and what's been going on down there in New Orleans and Texas.
Yeah. So, I think for Tiffany and I both, anytime a storm heads towards the Gulf, towards Louisiana, there's a certain sense of anxiety that
Mm,
hits everyone who knows someone from Louisiana. And so, when we had these two storms come through, Marco wasn't that bad, but Laura really devastated a lot of Louisiana, and even the areas that aren't on the news are impacted. So there's a city, Lake Charles. We all know people, have people that we love in Lake Charles, and it's just devastated.
mm,
And
Mhm.
so my hometown, there's no power, there's no water. It is incredibly hot today, so people are being creative to try to find a place to cool off.
mm,
So really keep our state in your prayers,
Yeah,
on top of COVID, on top of everything else that's going on
mhm.
in the world. It's just one more thing.
yeah.
Yep.
So,
And as a disclaimer, we had to kind of tell Karen what was going on because we were both so out of sorts all week. And and she finally sent a text message, "Y'all are speaking Louisiana. Someone tell me what is going on." And I was like, "Okay, this is
Yeah,
what is going on."
yeah.
Yeah. And so it's everything Zanetta just said. And New Orleans wasn't impacted. And so a lot of times when you hear a hurricane in the Gulf, everyone's like, oh, is New Orleans okay? But like, there's a rest of the state too.
Yeah.
Um,
right,
and the southwestern part of the state really got hit hard. So, yep,
right,
definitely thinking about y'all tonight and
Mhm.
stay in tune with how we can help.
right.
Yes. So family who's down there, friends, we love y'all. We're thinking about you guys. And I know you might not be able to be live with us tonight, but hopefully you'll catch up with the content. We're going to get real. And, I think our podcast that dropped on Tuesday, most of y'all know our podcast drops every Tuesday. And this last one that we talked about was about the leaky pipeline and talking about many of the things that lead to the low numbers of Blacks who are in academia, who are in medicine, who are in lots of different
Right.
professional careers, right? We talked about that leaky pipeline, but we oftentimes on this podcast and on this live will talk about health related issues and how we can engage the community and what we can do as physicians, but to the point of we talk about this all the time. Only 20 to 25% of health happens inside of a doctor's
Right.
office, right? So much of what happens with respect to health happens in the community. And we had started this discussion talking about how we can improve the pipeline and what are the things that we can do, but not us necessarily just as clinicians, but really what the community can do. And that speaks to family, right? That speaks to us having communities. And I think it's really important, particularly in thinking of what just recently happened this week with Jacob Blake. I tell you, we got a lot of work to do. So I just, for those people who don't know about Jacob Blake, hopefully you've heard about him, but he's the gentleman who was unfortunately shot in the back 7 times by cops in front of his children. And we have another example of someone who was almost murdered by police. But then you juxtapose that to the 17-year-old gentleman, white man, who was walking down the street with a rifle and literally shot people, and the cops are handing out water. I just feel like there's so much going on right now, and there's so much that we really need to talk about. So one of y'all needs to have a little convo on this.
Yeah. So, and I think it's real interesting that these themes keep coming up, right? Because when we came up with the idea that we wanted to start the podcast, we wanted to start talking to people, it was about cancer. I mean, we're oncologists. Right. It was like, we're tired of, Black people dying more from cancer, and that's our wheelhouse. So like, let's take it to the community and start and work and see what we can do. And it's like every week we're thinking, okay, we're going to talk about this about cancer or that about cancer. And it's just like, there's so many more pressing issues in terms of the health of the communities. And I feel like one that keeps coming up right now is, we talked about this on the last live, I think, protecting your mental health. So I try not to, if I can, watch the actual videos because they just stay with me once I see them. And so I try not to see them. And so I did see that one, and a video that I saw years ago was Tamir Rice. And so what I found particularly triggering was, there were comparisons made, rightfully so, between Tamir Rice being gunned down in a playground with a toy gun versus the shooter that we just saw in Kenosha. And so that kind of started me, that video of Tamir Rice and the cops like rolling up to the playground from years ago started playing in my mind. And I'm like, this is why I try not to see the videos, and so it's funny because I feel like we're in this kind of, I don't know, this recurring situation where although we're trying to talk about cancer, is like too much going on and we got to talk about other things. But I think that the point that it makes is that we really need to think about how to take care of our health in the middle of all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Your mental health, your just overall chronic diseases, your activity level, all of that stuff. You have to take care of yourself so that you're healthy and your community's healthy to go out there and do the work you need to do. And the work you need to do might be your 9-to-5 job. It might be working the polls. It might be protesting, whatever that is. You can't do it if you don't have your optimal health, right? And so for me, that's kind of what I always come back to. I think it's kind of what kind of sparked me going into medicine in the beginning. And again, I think for the health of communities and everyone, it takes everybody, not just the docs,
Right. And the thing that's very sad is that, this is nothing new. The difference is, we have video, right? So we all have stories, heard stories. This is nothing new. And if you think back in history, it's the anniversary of the March on Washington, the I Have a Dream speech, the murder of Emmett Till. And so when you think that, like, if you just go back, August 28th, all the things that happened, and one of the things that was so powerful about the Emmett Till story is the fact that his mother chose to have an open casket because she knew the power of seeing the just, I don't know, this is just moral degradation of what they're doing to people. And Emmett Till, that was one time. We are seeing it once a month.
Yes.
Right?
And how many are we not seeing? Right. So think about the ones that we're seeing.
How many are we not seeing? And so I think one of the things that's resonated with me, we always want to do something. And I always feel that I don't know what to do. I don't know how to go about it. Karen is my advocacy policy person. But on an individual level, what can I do to make this better? And so I was really happy when I saw the NBA and
Mhm.
people using their platform to try to make a change. So
Yes.
this was, one of the few NBA shirts that I had. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Pelicans. If I
Whatever.
had one, I would wear it. But
Yeah.
it's using your platform. And
Yes.
one of the things that I think about with us in Three Black Docs, I don't want to miss an opportunity
Mhm.
to use whatever platform I have, no matter how big or small it is, to make sure that we are moving not only the conversation forward, but I want to be a part of the change. And
Yes.
I want my grandkids to be able to say, you know
Mhm.
what? When America was destroying herself, this is what my grandma did. And
Yes.
so, you know, really, mobilizing our communities as a family. Like we wanted this to be like a family reunion.
Yes.
That's what it was supposed to be from the very beginning. And, in this family meeting, what are we going to do next? How
Yes.
are we going to use our platform inside our communities uh, to make this better?
Yes,
So,
yes, yes. And that's what we want, whoever listeners out there. I see you, Amber. Hey, girl. Thank you for joining tonight. For those folks who are on, whether you be on a listening program or a watch party or listening live, please make sure to comment because we want to hear what some of the solutions are going to be. What's interesting is that 4 years ago this week, Colin Kaepernick
right.
knelt for the first time 4 years ago, right? And he started using that as he started using his platform to start to talk about the issues related to violence, police violence against, and police brutality against Blacks. And look what's happened. His
Since then,
career was essentially ruined, right? But now,
right.
like you said, you not only is it the NBA, it's the WNBA,
And I should have said
right?
WNBA because actually it was the WNBA that started it. I know the NBA, kind of is getting a lot of the credit, but it really was the WNBA that really went out and said, look, we are going to support the community. So you're absolutely
Mhm.
right, Karen.
Mhm. Well, but it's also the baseball league, right?
Right.
So we have
Hockey
the professional
League.
hockey league. We've got our tennis star, our young,
Yeah.
Naomi,
Naomi.
Monica.
right? Who is like, I'm out. So again, how can people use their platform, whatever that platform is? I don't care if you're a teacher, you might be a lawyer, you might be a store clerk. What are the platforms that we can use in our community? What are the ways that we can engage our community around social justice and health? Because again, health is not just about disease, the presence or absence of disease. It's all of the social constructs, including the racism that we see, including the police violence. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what's going on. Hey, Monica. Hey, girl. How you doing? One of the things that I think is really fascinating is there are some people who are like, oh my goodness, I didn't know police violence was happening in the Black community. Right. I know that you've probably heard some of that from some of your colleagues. Do you know that back in 1966, the Black Panther Party was actually started as a protest, really, or as a way to start to surveil against some of the violence that was happening in the Black communities in California. It was really created to monitor the police, if you will, because it wasn't like everybody had a smartphone and they could record. But there were these things that were happening in the Black communities that were in California that really kind of spoke to a need for the communities to come together and to do something different. And it was fascinating because they did have open carry, right? So they carried their firearms,
Right.
et cetera, openly while they did their surveillance work. But it was interesting because that was more threatening to some individuals,
Right.
right?
And the NRA didn't support that.
But it's
Right. And
fascinating. NRA is all over, other people walking around with their guns, right?
right. And the other thing that the Black Panther Party did um, was that they mobilized the community. There were breakfast programs, there were sickle cell programs, there were
Yes.
programs within the community that were actually quite helpful. And so
Yes.
many people in the Oakland community, they remember the Panther Party for having educational programs
Yes.
and for having these food programs. And so
Yes.
I think a lot of what we hear is the violence and kind of the
Mhm.
infiltration by
Mhm.
the FBI. But some of the things that worked well were things that helped move the community forward. And really,
Mhm.
if you're hungry, if you're traumatized, if your mental health is not taken care of,
Yeah,
How can you be effective in anything?
You
exactly.
can't do anything
You can't do
without
anything.
having your health, right?
Right.
And this is like, this is what gets me so angry, and I'm gonna try not to start clapping this time.
Clap if you need
Now
to.
you can, yes, girl, go ahead. This is your
But
day.
it's this idea of like, oh, we didn't know that was going on, right? I mean, it was the same thing with COVID, and it was like, oh, Black people are dying more.
Yeah, how
Who
about that
ever heard of
disparities?
that? Are you kidding me? We've known this forever, and so it's always this like, oh well, it's news. This is news. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
It's not. Why is it news? We know this stuff, you know. And in terms of disparities and worse outcomes, you know, for Black people with health, I'm going to put, you know, our feet to the fire as doctors, as medical health professionals. We've known about this in medicine for decades.
Mhm.
So why is it still exist?
Yeah.
It can't. I don't think the solution can all come from the medical community, because it hasn't. For whatever reason, it hasn't. Right. And
You mean health disparities, improving
yeah,
health outcomes in
Well,
Black
but
right.
people.
but
And so
again,
this is part of the issue of like bringing it out to the community and saying, like, for whatever reason, the people who are charged to, you know, to address this haven't, won't, whatever they did isn't working. So how long do you wait? How long do you wait?
You don't wait anymore. You don't wait
Right.
anymore.
right,
And
and
so
that's go ahead, Z.
go okay. Well, and I was going to say sometimes I think people are never some people they don't have to confront people of a different race.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
never come in contact. Everything within a structure, you may never see or interact with people on a personal level who are different from you.
Right.
Mhm.
That's the way systemic racism works. Like you're
Yeah.
never forced to deal with things that may make you uncomfortable. And so I think now is the time, now that these institutions don't have the authority that they used to, we don't have to wait anymore. I think it's time for us within our own communities to help each other. And
Yeah.
if you want to be an ally, come on board.
Come on with it. But to Tiffany's point about health disparities and why they haven't been fixed, it's because the issues are not it's not just the healthcare system, right?
Right.
These are
It's
much
everything
bigger
else.
issues. The
Yep.
fact that we can have an election where the majority of this country votes for one person and someone else gets elected speaks to this issue of the electoral college, right? And the fact that it is washing out the popular vote. It's strategic, right? All of that redlining and all the gerrymandering and the redistricting that kind of puts Black people and it puts a little curve around the Black people so that you can have them only have one vote, one collective vote. That's all strategic, and that stuff is what is dictating what resources are going to communities, and
Right.
all of those other issues that really in some ways the entire structure, the way that our government and the way that our country runs needs a restructuring. But that's a hard sell, and to your point, we know that that's not going to happen overnight. It could, but we have got to mobilize our family. We need to have this family meeting now and say, what are the things that we can do as a community? What are the things that are reasonable? What are the things that we can literally walk outside our door tonight or tomorrow and do? And that's what we want to get comments on. I'm trying to look and see what comments we have in here so far. I think part of the issue, oh, this is interesting. So
I'm not
Lisa
seeing
here.
any.
Yeah, no, there's lots of
Yeah,
comments
yeah,
coming
yeah,
through.
yeah.
Fill me in. Let me know.
Go ahead, Z, because I don't have my glasses on, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, but
I'm trying to
Karen,
look
you
cute up in here.
have glasses.
I know I have them, but I'm trying to look cute.
so Lisa is saying,
Lisa
we need
who?
to
Lisa,
have,
my cousin?
yeah, Lisa, your cousin,
Oh, hey,
is
Lisa.
really saying, I almost think you're right. We need to have more of our community helping us, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's people helping people, because we are so much stronger when we're together than when we're
Yes.
apart. And I think, as far as health goes, we know there's a general mistrust of the healthcare system, and that's one of the things Tanya's saying. And sometimes in our
Oh, I can
community, we seek medical care when it's too late. I think we know that kind of has a historical precedent. But when we are talking about tomorrow, what can we do tomorrow to help on a smaller scale that can be part of a larger scale? And what's something that we can commit to? Because honestly, I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I know the answer to that.
I don't.
Well, I mean, if we did,
Well,
Yeah, we wouldn't
we were
be
done it already,
having.
right? So we wouldn't be having a conversation, right? So I think
Right.
that's where we have to think collectively, and again, not just say, or this is the healthcare system, this is the legal system, this is
Right.
the political
Right.
system. It
Right.
really does
Yes.
have to be all encompassing. And
So
how do
so
we do that?
tangible, Monica.
Mm-hmm.
How many of us have filled out our census forms?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mhm.
Get your
Mhm.
census form
Right?
filled out, right? And even still, when you do that, we know that the resources oftentimes don't come into the communities. There's all of this policy and politicking that goes on, but that's the first step. We at least need to have a good count of who's around and make sure that there is a way for our bodies to be counted so that we can have more infrastructure for the schools, et cetera.
But
That's important.
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tiff.
This idea, and I love that suggestion, fill out your census, right? Like
Takes 2
easy
minutes.
peasy, right? But also the idea, and I think we talked about it a little bit in the last episode of like, it really is checking in with what your talent is, what you're good at, and what you have time for.
Mhm.
Okay, like we're doctors. Okay, we have medical knowledge. We can share that freely. We want to share it freely. We plan to share it freely if we can ever get back to our topics, our medical topics, right? But for us, it's like, all right, well, that's something that we can do. But you don't have to be a doctor or a nurse or in healthcare, because really taking care of your health is everyone has a part in that, right? And so maybe your thing is, you have the gift of gab, and you could talk people into doing anything. Maybe you could talk people into coming to a walk with you. You know what I mean? And you guys can talk on a Saturday and get your exercise in. Maybe you like to be politically active and involved that way. So maybe you, like Karen, could go up and get more involved in policy work, right? But I think it's just kind of thinking about what it is you like to do, what you're good at doing, and what you have time and capacity to do.
Yeah.
I know for me, I kind of always get into these, like, it has to be big and grand and like readily apparent that it's going to be earth shattering, or else I possibly can't do it. Me, Dr. Tiffany, you know what I mean? But I think that's all wrong. And I think the way that I thought about it before was wrong. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's making the small changes with the people around you, right? And
Yep.
coming into community, right? And if like just the people around you can see you taking time, making priorities for your personal health and the health of your community, I think that's where it starts. I see it.
And I
Modeling
agree.
healthy behaviors inspires us.
Yes.
Right, Amber?
Go ahead,
Absolutely.
Amber.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that's one aspect. So
Also
I want
doctor, for
to
those
move away from the health piece, because I don't, again, I think there are so many issues right now that people are not able to prioritize their health. I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but I think, again, when you think about what's happening in our communities, even the fact that we have individuals who are co-opting the Black Lives Matter movement. I don't know if y'all saw in Washington, D.C., there was a white woman who was sitting there eating, she was eating outside on the curb, because, everybody's now out dining al fresco. So she was out with her friend having dinner, and here comes a crowd, a mob of people that were actually protesting and had Black Lives Matter signs and whatever, and they got in her face, like this close to her face, and were hollering and screaming and telling her to lift up her fist in solidarity. Guess what? There was not a single Black person in that crowd that was doing that. And so the same thing with the looting and stuff that we've seen happening, where, it's fascinating when we're out there trying to have peaceful protest as Black people, who are the ones who've been impacted the most by the systemic racism. And then the movements get co-opted by individuals who claim to have allyship, but really aren't doing us any favors. how can we counteract that? What are some things that we as a community can do? Again, yes, modeling behavior, but I tell you, there was a comedian who was on the other day who says she's been arrested twice because she was having peaceful protests. She literally was sitting on the ground, peaceful protest, and she got arrested by the cops. But yet we can have other individuals, white individuals, who claim to be kind of there for Black Lives Matter, and they're literally harassing people who are trying to dine, who are co-opting the movement, and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this speaks to some of these issues. These are deep-rooted issues in terms of the systemic racism. We started out talking about that 17-year-old boy who was walking around with a rifle and the cops are handing him water, but yet you have Tamir Rice who's got a play gun who gets shot, or even, Jacob Blake, who gets shot in his back and he's not even armed. So these systemic issues are the ones I want to talk about, the social justice issues, because to your point, yes, we're clinicians, but there's a lot that we can do outside of the role, outside of medicine, that really can address some of these issues. So what are some things that we can do as a family, as a community, that really can start to help and focus on our attention on some of these social justice issues? I'm trying to see what's going on in here. Let's see.
Got to put your glasses on.
I know it.
But one of the things about any movement, one of the things I like about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I've said this before, is the fact that there is not a clear leader that can be taken out. So I thought that was actually very strategic on their part, that this is a movement. It was a grassroots effort that has, spread throughout the United States, because the United States has a history of, taking out leaders and then the movement is gone, right? So with Black Lives Matter, there's just too many people. And, I think the vigilante groups, or, whoever these people are that are trying to co-opt, who are organizing and doing, because they're organized, right? It's doing the looting and the protesting. I think we can be just as strategic.
Mm-hmm.
So even Martin Luther King, he was a nonviolent protester, but really the genius of what he did was that he knew the media would pay more attention to someone being beat in a nonviolent way than they would in other ways. So they would train in their training. They would literally train to beat each other up, because they knew that there was a message and there was a strategy to get to the bigger point. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we need to be very strategic in what we're doing. And so I think that with getting our voices out there, we almost have to be louder than them. Mm-hmm. And I think that, people with videos who are showing the people who are doing the burning, at least now, in a short amount of time, we know now it's not the protesters who are really doing most of the harm.
Right.
And so I think, to the larger point with some of the things, I keep going back to the NBA, because I like that they're using their platform. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I heard that they're doing tonight is using their stadiums as a voting center, right? So,
which is what I was going to talk about.
Right. So on a smaller scale, what we can do individually, in people who have the gift of gab, or people who make sure people in your community vote.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the biggest things that we can do. It's a short-term commitment.
Yes.
We only have a little over 2 months.
A few more weeks
before it's time to vote.
And not vote for Kanye. I'm just saying.
I was about
He did make the ballot.
He did in some states. He's in, I think, 12 states.
And and also, there's no such thing as a protest vote.
No.
Right? There's no such thing as a protest vote.
Because we saw what happened that last time, right?
Right. And some of the things that also I've noticed that people are doing in some of these private Facebook groups, the Black community, I think we're really starting to talk to each other and see how we can use our own resources. Tiffany, your cousin Lisa, is talking again,
yes,
and saying, about Black Wall Street.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We did best when we had, small businesses within our community that supported our community. And I know now, my husband last night was looking up Black banks and looking to,
Ashley was too. Yep,
looking to put money in Black banks. So one small thing that we can do is to support our Black businesses.
Yes.
Right. And not just on one day.
You see my jewels. So these are my jewels here that from Body and Soul, downtown Winston-Salem. My girl Dana. Hey girl, how you doing? Had to put it on tonight, right? Because I was feeling that, just exactly that. How can we support our Black businesses? And remember the challenge back in the day, because Oklahoma. Did we talk about Oklahoma? I can't remember. Where Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, and
episode, but yeah.
Remember that. We did have Black Wall Streets in several cities, including Durham, and they got decimated or destroyed because of individuals coming in and using whatever, excuse they could. And in Oklahoma, it happened to be that there was a Black man who apparently tripped and touched a white woman, and then all of a sudden the whole friggin' town gets burned down. The new thing is, and the beautiful thing is now most of what we do is electronic, right? So, it's not, it's easier to support people from all over the country, and we really can start to use our money. And Lisa's point was this: other countries do it, right? Other communities, we see they're supporting each other, they're buying from their own people. We see that, look at the reason why we have Little Italy, or when we have Chinatown. Those are communities that come together and say, we're going to support the individuals who are from like culture. And so we know that works, and it's a really good point to think about, can we be strategic in terms of making sure that our dollars are being spent in the Black community? There are studies that look at that, for every $1 that's spent, how much of it comes back into that community. And we know that for Blacks, out of all the communities, it doesn't matter if you're Hispanic, if you're Asian or white, Blacks have the lowest dollar return back into the community. So Lisa, thank you for bringing up that point. Yes, it's pennies. It's literally pennies on the dollar.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you all here that there is a list of online Black-owned plant shops that I am a proud supporter of. I've gotten many plants from Black-owned plant businesses online, as well as accessories. I
talk about plants
in a minute as well.
She found a way to get plants.
I'm not mad.
To your point,
girl, I had to drink on that one. Look, I got my.
You didn't ask when we were drinking.
That's okay. I'm about to do that.
It's easy. It's easier these days to find Black-owned businesses.
It is.
And to support them. And and oftentimes, if there's a certain genre of something you like, be it plants or pots, skincare, hair care, whatever. You can usually find a list now, right?
Potentially, yes. So one of the things that my child and I have been talking about is the Black business that we would like to own, and we've thought about two. One is actually I want to have a distillery, so that's one of the things. And I don't even know what I'm drinking, but Z, what are you drinking? If you're drinking water, then we need to get you some water farm or something.
No, so okay, I know y'all see me. I'm trying my best to, for the audience. I got some wings here that I'm trying not to pick up and suck the bone on. Just be out of consideration, out of respect for the very classy people who are listening. But I have a new cup with a new straw.
And there's a dark liquid in it.
There is. And this, of course, is a cherry Coke. Tiffany, it's a cherry Coke
in a wine glass. Just...
Why not?
Exactly. Why not? It's lovely.
And look,
Tiffany. Okay, so what are you drinking, Tiffany?
Sangria.
Okay, very nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm drinking something with a liquor in it, so that's just to say that my liquor business, is going to be up and running. I don't know when, but it's going to happen.
But then you have the distillery, you're going to have grounds for receptions, and I'm going to be the person that hypes up the reception. I already told you. It's my next career.
I love it. But all right. Let's go back to this discussion, because there's a couple of really good points.
I had something to say.
This is why I love Dr. Erica.
But let me.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, take her. But listen, there are a couple of good comments too. So Monica Lynn says, going back to the vote, calling 10 friends and asking them if they've registered to vote, right? So important to make sure that people are registered to vote, register early. And, if you have early voting, which you do in North Carolina, which I'm happy about, because I'm a little bit nervous about trying to use the Postal Service. But look, mail works in some states where they've had it, it should work. But I tell you, there's a lot of stuff going on, but that's really important. And then the other thing that Tanya Hicks was talking about, she said, we don't have clear leadership to be that strategic. And it's like the basketball players having to take a stance, when we elect leaders. I think, again, this is where using your voice, whatever your platform is. And, it is true. I think one of the things, and I know I keep going back to your dad, Zanetta, he had that one quote, right? In the absence of leadership, right? If there's a void, this is an opportunity for those of us who may not have ever thought of ourselves as leaders to actually become community leaders and to engage. All right, Tiffany,
Right.
I'm sorry.
That's it, right? And
Right.
that's what I was going to say, because you don't have to have, it doesn't have to be this great, this
Leaders are made for the moment.
thing, right? It's
Right.
you're in your community. What do you do best? What do you like to do? What do you have time to do? And what that's it, and again, the way that my mindset was set up was like, oh, it's got to be something big and, with titles and whatever. And it really doesn't.
No.
It's about what you bring to the table, and everybody has something to offer. Now, I'll say this, I'll put myself on blast. Ugh. And so in thinking about really, what I could do very practically, one thing that I've been considering doing, and I told y'all this, is signing up to be a poll worker for the first time ever.
Oh, I thought you were going to say pole dancer. I was like, you pole what? Okay. I got you. I'm with you. Poll, POLL. Like, yes, voting. Yes. Thank you. I'm just
voting booth.
Yes.
Booth. Election day.
So, and just trying to think of something, things that like maybe you never consider. I never in a million years would you have said, do you want to go work the polls and sit there and check off people's address, and all of that. And I was like, I'll never do this. Never. And now I'm like, maybe I should volunteer to work the polls this time.
Just make sure you don't lick your finger. I told you about the lady when I went. I was like, this is nasty. It's too COVID right now. You can't do that. But yeah, so that's a really good thing to kind of get out in the community, do something different, to really support your community, which is so important and vital. But to your point, Tiffany, this is one of the challenges, I think, even with Black entrepreneurs. They feel like they have to have all the ducks in a row.
Yes.
Right. You feel like you have to have this grand plan and it has to be all perfect before you start. And that's not the way business works. That's not the way it works to become a leader or to become, a community, engaged in your community.
Overnight.
It doesn't. And so it's okay to take those baby steps. You want to be more engaged in your community. Maybe you start attending, a community forum or whatever it is. Just doing something to be present in the community is really important. And so there doesn't have to be a grand plan. So I love that acknowledgement of it doesn't have to be perfect. There doesn't have to be this big old thing, but taking small steps to engage in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. So something that I've done on a smaller scale. So I am in a very wonderful sorority, and I thank you, Tiffany. Yeah, I am in a very wonderful sorority.
Z, you know what you don't do.
And honestly, like I've really felt like I haven't had time to participate in community events, sorority events, and it was always, I'm so busy. There's so much going on. I don't have time. Now I don't have time not to do something. There is not an excuse for me not to be a part of something that maybe can help the community in some way. And so I think this may be on a smaller scale, but on a larger scale, you can influence certain types of change. And so, Tiffany's going to be a poll worker. I am going to be more involved within my community because I can't just sit on the sidelines anymore and say, oh, I'm a doctor, I'm so busy.
Yes,
everyone's busy.
Exactly.
Everyone's stressed. Everyone has something going on.
Absolutely.
But
yes.
But this is where the priorities are, right? And this is why the family meeting. So, like, I remember when we got family meetings, called like, oh my goodness, what's going on? But it was always about a strategy, about an issue, what's the problem, and how are we going to fix that, right? That was always like when we were having our family meetings. Oh, hey, Erica, I'm drinking a peach whiskey sour. That's what I'm drinking, I was told. But one of the things that I think is important to think about, like you said, what is your strength? What are the things that, is needed in the community? I actually used to do, when I was I did it in Boston, but I actually did it more when I was in Durham, North Carolina. I actually worked at the food banks.
Mhm.
And that right now, with all of the food insecurity, particularly in the Black and brown communities, is really important, not only to make sure that those are fully stocked, but fully staffed so that we can get things out to our community. Because like you said, when people are hungry, there's so much that they can't do. And so I'm really proud of my team. The Office of Cancer Health Equity actually partnered with a Missionary Baptist Church and actually provided food to the community. We also provided masks. So Wings Production provided these gaiters that we sent out, with instructions to double them up because we know that gaiters aren't as effective in terms of
You're
preventing.
talking about the
Yeah,
masks that
yeah.
cover your neck.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the gaiters that kind of pull up versus the masks that go on. But it was really important for us to partner with the community in that way. Again, it's one thing to talk about COVID and how to protect yourselves, by using masks. It's a whole other thing when people are hungry. You just need to meet people where they are. And so that's why kind of getting in the community and asking people what they need, it could be a church, it could be, AARP, I don't care what it is, but find a group or find some way to connect.
Right.
Mhm.
And the other thing is that people need funds to do things.
Mm.
So, I'm not a billionaire.
You're not.
Karen, you're
Oh,
on your
man.
way.
Yeah, okay.
Tiffany is right behind her
No.
or right in
Whatever.
front of her.
Whatever.
But you know what? I mean, our charities that are supporting our communities, they need money. So even if it's, a couple of
Yep.
dollars that you can donate, I think we have to invest because
Yes.
where you put your money, that's where your treasure is, right? So
Mhm.
we have got to start investing more consistently in our
Mhm.
community so that they
Yeah.
know that this is important, and then that brings other people in who may have more resources. So
Mhm. And Tanya Hicks has a really important point. We were talking a little bit about the black dollar, right? And
yeah,
her point is even about the time spent, that the
yeah,
black dollar doesn't even spend 24 hours in the community, right? And in
Yeah.
other communities, it circulates for days. So again, are there ways that we can find to really support our Black-owned businesses? Or can we, as budding entrepreneurs, even start to think about ways that people can invest in us so that we can give back to the community? And I must say, okay, so Chantel, people and organizations need
Hey.
money. Yes, Black-led organizations, absolutely.
yes,
But that also means that we have to be good stewards of that too. And so, there's a lot of pressure, I think, on communities of color right now. And again, to Tiffany's point, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're gonna make mistakes, and as we scale up, I'm watching on television how they're like these black bars, some of them in Winston or in Durham that are just recently opened, and here they are struggling through COVID. Are there ways that we can support them, either ordering
Yeah.
food from those businesses or going and grabbing a drink after work, a cup of coffee? There's actually a coffee shop that's a Black-owned coffee shop here in Winston-Salem now. So are there ways that we can support those businesses that are out there struggling, just like everybody else is struggling? But really, if we can keep those Black dollars in our community, that would be awesome. We have a lot of power. I just don't think that we realize how
Harness
much
it.
power.
right. And other companies realize it. That's why they target their commercials to us,
There
right?
you go. There you go.
So
There you
so
go.
it's time to start leveraging the power.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Hello, Courtney Bagayoko.
Oh,
Did you
cool.
see
Oh,
her?
I thought you were
Yeah,
saying.
I did. I was like,
Yeah, I just saw her.
yeah. I know. I was like, I'm trying to look.
Sorry,
I
guys,
don't
I
have my
transition
glasses.
very weird. I transition. You got to work with me
Apparently.
with my transitions. But we do. I mean, we do. We have a lot of financial power that we can
Yes.
leverage. So
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on the Dr. Karen Wingfield Watch show. I see some folks. Hey, Diana, how you doing? Who else is there? Naturally charmed. That's Denise. Yes, I can see you. I can see you, my dear. So I think, it's really important to, again, think about not only how Black dollars can stay in the community, but also how our allies can support. I actually had a really great colleague of mine from Boston actually called me up and was like, "Look, I just need to do something, and I don't know where to give to." So of course I'm like, "Okay, so let me rattle off a list of Black businesses or Black
Sure.
ways that you can support, right?" And
Yeah.
so that's the other thing. And what we can do is we can certainly curate a list of companies that people, if they're interested in donating to. I always kind of talk about HBCUs. That was part of our conversation, even on the podcast on Tuesday, about the importance of historically Black colleges and universities and the part that they
please
play.
donate.
even in terms of kind of building the workforce, whether it be in medicine or law, or just kind of really getting students who may not have had an opportunity to go to college or to have that college experience, and to really have their identity solidified, that they're confident in who they are. I think that is wonderful if you can do that. The Legal Defense Fund, right? So that's another, because again, we have disproportionate number of individuals who are being arrested who are Black, who are peacefully protesting, unlike some other folks who are getting arrested. And having that legal defense fund is really important. So it's those sorts of organizations that really can
And
help move.
there's also the Equal Justice Initiative with Brian Stevenson, who has the lynching memorial in Alabama. But they do a lot of good work just along the same lines. But I think it would be great. I think that's another thing that we can do, curating a list to send out so that we know different people. And if you all, I guess, who are listening, if you know of organizations that maybe we should think about adding to the list that we're not aware of.
Okay, Dr. Erica. You see this? She said there's an
Yep.
app called the Official Black Wall Street that has lots of Black businesses. So we'll make sure we get a link, and we will post that link for folks. Thank you so much for that. There are other apps that are rising up and cropping up now that are showing where Black businesses are. So that's great as well. And I think, again, what you can do, if you know of Black-owned businesses in your community, let us know. We're happy to post it. So if you're if you're in Louisiana, or if you're in North Carolina, or if you're in Texas, wherever you are, if you know of Black-owned businesses that you would like to make sure people are aware of, just let us know so we can highlight them. We give them a shout out on social media. That'd be great.
That's great. Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think the dollars piece is really important. But again, let's think a little bit more about what people might be able to do in their own prevention. Let's talk about teachers. I don't know how many of y'all have teachers in your family, but I feel like the teachers in our country are so undervalued. And Tiffany brought this point up. Was it on the last podcast? I can't remember, Tiffany, where you were talking about how we put so much pressure on the school systems,
Yes.
right, to kind of cure all the ails, right?
Yeah.
Children don't have food to eat, and so they're like, well, you got to open the school so the kids can eat. It's
Right.
like, well, whose responsibility is that really?
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that, Tiff, because you had some really good and salient points around that, and I think it's worth repeating here.
Well, I think we were talking about it in the context of trying to be sure that Black students have the opportunities to be prepared for careers in medicine, right? So we were talking about it in terms of making sure the pipeline to get into medical school gets Black kids in it, and that Black kids are prepared for, college and medical school. And so that was the context of it. But then it was like, everything nowadays is coming back to put it on the teachers, right? Like, the schools feed the kids. Then, when the issue of guns in schools came up, It was like, well, let's give the teachers guns.
It's crazy. Yeah.
But I mean, this is
right.
Sometimes I'm at a loss for words. So anyway, the point of teachers being, undervalued, I think, is like such an understatement, It's an understatement,
yes.
And there's so much to do with kids, right, as they develop around their education, making sure kids have the support that they need, and making sure that the kids that don't have all the supports that they need, that as a community, we're taking care of them. And it's not just through the schools. Just like we said, if you're hungry, you can't do much of anything. And that's what we hear in the schools, like the amount of kids whose the meals that they can count on.
Speaking of meals,
school, right?
Janetta is going for it. Go ahead.
Look, I got hungry. I can't be hungry.
Right, I know. We know.
Go ahead.
When COVID hit and they were talking about the schools closing, and it was like, well, we have to give we still have to provide meals because the kids can't eat. To your point, we could be working in the food banks. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
there's so much more that we could be doing.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all to support
So
the
part of what I'm
kids.
trying to get at too is, when I look at teachers, what are the things that they can do? Perhaps there's a way for them to come together and to coalesce and to really say, we really need to be teaching our kids, not focused on these other extraneous things, because we know that education is the key.
Yes.
Education is the key to having social
And not
mobility.
carrying guns and
Correct.
waiting for somebody to bust in your class,
Yes.
and then you gotta
Yes.
no.
So perhaps if you're a teacher, maybe there can be some strategy around how do you make sure that the teachers can actually do their job. Number one, they also need to get paid better, but that's a whole other issue. Can't go there tonight. But are there ways that teachers can strategize together to say we really want to be about the business of teaching and less about the social components of things? But that means that others of us need to step up and need to support the teachers. So Chantel says teachers are held accountable for misaligned standards. Yes, privatization of public schools is a huge issue, and teachers
Very
aren't
big.
protected but must
They're not.
exceed all these expectations. Absolutely. It's ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous. So this is why our votes matter. Because a lot of these decisions are made on the local level. There are some things that are made on the federal level in terms of support for some federal programming, but for the most part, decisions around what happens in the school systems is happening on the local level. And the challenge is that right now, the way that supports for our schools is related to where people live. Again, it's zip code, zip code, zip code.
And property
Location matters,
taxes.
right? Exactly. So we know that there are schools that have an abundance of resources and they don't have the same issues as other schools. And so how do we normalize that? How do we take away the inequities that are in the system? That does have to be, I think, something that's done at either a federal or state level, because, the people on a local level, there's no reason for them to be concerned about what's happening 2 zip codes down the street. If it's not their children, they're not going to care about that. And so we have to figure out ways, again, that we can bring social justice to the forefront in everything that we're doing as possible. Because, again, this is our family. This is our family.
And
go ahead.
I also want to motivate, I think there are some people on this forum who could very easily hold public office. If you think about the current Speaker of the House, she's like a mother of 5 who didn't get into politics until later on and started at the local level and then worked her way up. One of the things about the last election is that there were a record number of women who ran for public office.
Yes.
And so I think, to Tiffany's point about starting off, you know what? It's small. You may start off as a POLL poll worker. And
I am not running for office.
Right. I'm not saying that you are, but I'm just saying that, you know what?
That's it.
I mean, there may be a Chantel out there who is like running for school board or city council or something like that. Because I mean, honestly, the last couple of sentences that she wrote sounds so much better than many of the people in Florida who are elected to office. So
Come on now.
I think when we say it's time to do the work,
and it goes to your point of supporting people with dollars, supporting candidates with dollars across, your state, perhaps.
Right.
People that you see that you feel like should be in office that might not be the typical candidates. So they need extra help.
Right.
And for those of you who don't have dollars, you can volunteer time. Time is so important.
Or your talents. Or your talents.
Or your talents. Whatever that is.
So my sister is donating some of her computer skills to a local election right now.
Great.
So, whatever it is that you have, there is a gift that you have that you are better than other people in doing. And we can use that to support the movement.
Yes, absolutely. It is vital. And so, I do wish there was a leader, but there isn't one. But perhaps, again, that's not a bad thing.
I don't think we need it.
Remember the challenge, and we talked about this before, that when there have been 1 or 2 leaders, they oftentimes get taken out, and then
they are strategically targeted.
Correct.
And it's easy to dismantle a movement when all you have to do is shoot the leader. So
Correct. And that's why all of us need to say, how can we lead? How can we lead in our venues? How can we lead in our schools? How can we lead in our offices? How can we lead in our hospitals or in our clinics or in our workplace? Or how can we lead in our families even, right? Here
Yeah.
we are talking about family reunion. And I know earlier on we had said we're going to talk about genetics and knowing your family history. Yes, that's leading too, though. Okay, so let me tell you, when it comes to health and well-being, you can be the leader in your family that says, okay, the next family reunion that we have, we're all going to make sure that we understand what our family history is around health and well-being,
Yes.
right? Or
I
we
love
can,
that.
or when you're at your family reunion, you can talk about other things in terms of making sure everybody's registered to vote or making sure that people understand the local elections where they are. That's really important. Yeah. So Tanya was the one who had mentioned earlier, making sure that everyone has a health history of their parents up to their grandparents. And remember, it's, really important, not step grandparents. We're talking about physical, having that genetic component, really important for that. And so those are ways that we can lead individually. Again, doesn't have to be major, doesn't have to be big.
Doesn't have to
Well,
be major.
I
Yeah.
love the idea of kind of folks running for political office. I really do love that idea.
I know you do.
I'm not talking. No, I'm not saying me. I'm just saying I like the idea of people doing it because policy and advocacy is important. But it's these other things,
The
leading in
little
your
things.
family, making sure that your children have what they need, and advocating on behalf of your children to make sure that their education is prioritized. I can't tell you how many times I went up to my child's school when she was in high school. I know people are probably like, here she is again. I'm like, yeah, here I am again. Like I'm going to try my best to advocate for my family because that's the way that I can lead, right? So I think that's going to be important for.
Well, and I think, everyone has to start thinking of themselves as a leader. It dawned on me that in one of our discussions that I'm like, oh wait, I'm not the kid anymore.
right,
The high school
Yeah, you
class
said
is
that.
going to be visited, right? Because you
right.
feel like it. You feel
Mhm.
like,
You're
you're
so
still
young
a
at heart.
kid. But I'm
Mhm.
like, wait, I'm the grown up now. I'm the grown
Mhm.
up, and like I need to start thinking about this and taking things on. And so I think
Yes.
that people need to start thinking of themselves as leaders, as
Yes.
the grown-ups, as the responsible adults, which are in
Mhm.
short supply. But if you're a responsible adult, think about yourself as a leader, please, and how
Mhm.
you can start to impact those around you.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. That's
you
great.
know
We only have a few moments left. We only have probably about 4 minutes left. And so I just wanted to make sure that Z or Tiff, if you guys had last minute word of advice, Tiff, that was great. But certainly
that
if you have
probably
another
was my last minute
point.
word of advice. Like,
Okay.
let's think about yourself as a leader, and
Mm,
just think about what is something that is your unique talent, and how can you use it in the smallest, easiest of ways.
mm, mm. Okay.
And
Z?
and I think for me, it's committing myself to consistently supporting Black businesses. So I really like these lists that are going to be curated and making
Mhm.
sure that money is invested. I mean, even if you're not investing big money, you
Mhm.
know what? Pick up some food
Mhm.
from a local mom and pop shop.
Mhm.
That we can
Yes.
do, and that's something that we can commit to doing.
Yes, yes. And I want to say, I mean, it really is important to make sure they're Black-owned businesses because remember, there have been, particularly for hair care products, a lot of the Black hair care products are not owned by Blacks.
Right. And actually my line sister has a very good business that I will
Okay,
put on the list of Black hair care
great.
products. So
Great. And I think Ashley has a line sister that actually has even like products for skin and that sort of stuff, some
mhm.
cosmetic products. So, we will try to make sure, particularly if they're online businesses and you can get stuff sent all around the country, we'll try to make sure that that gets out. So again, please, 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 if you're listening and you have a Black business or know of one that you would like for us to make sure that we get it out, we're happy to kind of make sure that that gets out. We can tweet it out, we can put it on the list, et cetera. And we're happy to do that because our job here, we really do want to make sure that we are supporting our community. This is our family. You guys are our family. And so we appreciate you being here tonight. And I must say, again, I'm always going to be talking about policy and advocacy, but those are two different things, right? I think we can advocate on the local level. We can advocate within our families. We can advocate within our immediate sphere. Again, what's happening at the places where we work, live, and play. Those are important things. The social determinants of health, how can we advocate in those spheres? But then again, the policy piece, and I'm going to give my shout out again to my girl Monica, because we've got to get out the vote. We have to get out there. So please make sure that you ask, that you say, I'm going to talk to people and ask them if they not only have they registered to vote, but do they have a way to get to the polls? And that can be done with church groups, faith-based group, or other groups that you might be involved in. I really think it's important to make sure that we are supporting our communities in that way, because that's how we can start to move the needle. That's the slow way. And so again, I am the policy person, but Dr. Z and Dr. Tiff have been all over me about saying, well, what do we, until that happens, until we can see
Right.
the big shift, what
What are we
do
doing
we
yesterday?
need to do now? And those are the things that we can do. We can advocate on the individual and family levels, and we can make sure that we are leaders in our community, and we can make sure that we're spending our dollars right where it's going to make we literally will have the biggest bang for our buck. So we are so grateful that you joined us tonight for this family reunion, for this family meeting. And I know that there's a lot of family, literally, physical family that couldn't join us tonight because of the storms in Louisiana and in Texas. And we're just thinking about you guys. And again, thank you all for listening tonight, and we look forward to the next edition. Don't forget, podcast drop on Tuesday. Bye, y'all.
Good night.
See ya.